Brandon, let me start by asking, how do you choose who to approach on the street?
Well, that has evolved over time. When I first started doing Humans of New York, it was mainly photography, so I was looking for visual things. I was looking for people who might be very stylish or very eccentric. But now that the blog focuses so much on the stories of people now, what I'm normally looking for is somebody that I can talk to, which is normally somebody that's alone. So maybe somebody smoking a cigarette, sitting on a bench, leaning up against a wall. The hardest people to stop are people that are in a hurry. There's no tougher place to do interviews than Midtown at lunchtime.
And how do you make the approach?
How do I approach? It's all about energy. It's not really about what you say so much as how you say it. I try to be as calm and unthreatening as possible. Use a very quiet voice. I'll normally just walk up to somebody and I'll say, "Excuse me, do you mind if I take your photograph?" And then if there's a moment of hesitation, I will pull out my phone and I will show them the blog and I'll explain it to them. I think the main thing is just being comfortable with rejection, knowing that no matter how good you are at approaching people, there's going to be a certain segment of people that always say no. And so normally that is about 1 out of every 3 people will tell me no.
Let me put to you a couple of cliches that by now you would be very, very well qualified to either affirm or debunk. Number 1, don't judge a book by its cover.
Oh, well, don't judge a book like I mean, I think that that's probably a pretty accurate statement. There's been so many times where, and even me who has, interviewed so many people and learned so many people's stories, there's something very human about making snap judgments about people. Somebody bumps into you in the subway or cuts you off and you'll look at them and you'll make a snap judgment. It's very human. I think it takes a sort of a rational moment to kind of step back and say, this person has their own story. There might be a reason they're in a hurry. There might be a reason that they cut me off, and that they're probably, going through something pretty tough in their lives right now. I think that whenever you peel back the layers of people, you'll find that things are much more complex and nuanced and often tragic than you imagine at first glance. Yeah.
Okay, how about this one? Everybody has a story to tell.
Of course everybody has a story to tell. I believe, through my work, it's normally for me when an interview doesn't go well, it's not because the person didn't have a good story. It's just because they weren't very comfortable with the process. They weren't willing to maybe disclose enough or make themselves vulnerable enough to really tell their story in an honest and accurate way. But I find, when someone is comfortable with the process, pretty much always I can find something that's happened to them in their lives that is, very captivating or has a great narrative arc. Just by being patient and asking the right questions.
Are there any people out of all the hundreds to whom you've spoken who are particularly memorable to you?
There's been so many of them. There's been, some of them have led to kind of great community outreach. There was one young man in Brooklyn who I interviewed about his principal, and we ended up meeting the principal, and we raised $1.6 million for the school. So obviously that's memorable because of the impact it had. But there's also some that are just very memorable because they're very emotional. I remember on New Year's Eve last year, I was watching some fireworks and there was this man in a wheelchair dressed in tuxedo who was also watching the fireworks. And I asked him what the saddest moment of his life was, and he said it was when I woke up and I realized I was still alive after I tried to commit suicide. And that was a very powerful statement for me. Even, at that moment, it's a new year, people are celebrating, fireworks are going off, and, this man had been into a point in his life where his saddest moment was realizing he was still alive. And that one really hung with me for a few days.
What have you learned about life through this project?
Having talked to so many people and learned so many different stories, I'll find that there's not a single thing that I will go through in my own life that I can't think back to a Honey interview I did that somebody was going through something very similar. So as opposed to one specific overarching thing, Humans of New York has taught me thousands of things that apply in specific situations. And, always when I'm going through something in my life, seems like there's somebody I talked to in Humans of New York that was going through something very similar.
So really the cliche that I should have put to you earlier is that there's nothing new under the sun.
what was it that Abraham Lincoln said? He says, reading serves to teach me that all of my original thoughts weren't so original after all. I really like that quote. And yeah, it's, you know, there's been so many lives that have been so lived around the world that, you know, there's different variations of stories. You know, people have, you know, had their own very specific tragedies or their own specific triumphs. But, you know, I think the emotions and the feelings and the joys that we kind of go through are all very similar. They just take slightly different forms.
Brandon Stanton, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you so much.